couple of announcements real quick before we get started. Next Sunday, the 22nd, we will be at Amagi. Sunday, the 6th, we're going to be at Amagi. We're going to have a potluck after the service, so everybody bring your favorite dishes, desserts, all that. And then our next school prayer will be October the 13th, Sunday at 6, or 6 p.m., at Santa Fe High School.
October 13th?
Yes, October 13th.
They're going to be the second Sunday of every month.
Second Sunday of every month for the school prayer. Yes, ma'am.
Since I'm going to be gone, I won't be here to do breakfast, so.
Next weekend? Okay. So we will need to cover breakfast for Miss Debbie next weekend, so.
We got it.
We get that did.
He is good.
My phone before it starts going off through the speaker. So last Sunday after the service, we were praying with Kevin, and after that was over, I felt led, I felt compelled to volunteer for this weekend to give him a break and give him an opportunity to get fed, because he does so much as far as leading us and feeding us that he does need that break every now and then. And I had some stuff kind of in the bank, and I had some stuff that I'd been working on, and nothing really felt right. And I couldn't figure out why, and I was praying about it, and I was thinking about it, and nothing really felt, it wasn't there. It wasn't in my heart. I didn't feel it. And then Wednesday came. And Wednesday was the anniversary of obviously one of the most tragic events, if not the most tragic event that's ever happened in our country. They say every generation has that defining moment that you remember exactly where you were, you remember exactly what you were doing, every sight, every smell. And I think for my generation and for several generations probably, that was one of those defining moments. For me, that day hit really close to home, because at the time, sitting there watching that unfold, I was a young firefighter EMT working on an ambulance, watching this play out live on TV, and knew as we were watching it, we were talking about it, and we knew what was going on in there operationally. And that was difficult for us. It was tough for everybody. It was really difficult for us because of that, because there is that connection. Even if you don't know somebody personally, there's still that connection. As the years progressed, and over the years since then, as I got into teaching in the fire service, one of the primary things that I taught was incident command. So I took, over the years, and I studied that incident from an operational standpoint, from listening to the dispatch tapes, listening to the fireground communications, listening to the way everybody reacted, looking at the unit responses, looking at the things that happened operationally. And this Wednesday, as I was sitting down and I was watching some of the memorial stuff, and I was watching some stuff on the History Channel with the kids, it was just all of a sudden kind of a light bulb went off. And I saw it from a completely different perspective than what I'd ever seen. Still from a firefighter's perspective, still, looking on the fire side, and not to discount by any means any of the other people that lost their lives that day, but that was what I was connected to. Just looking from the firefighter's perspective, then overlaid with a biblical perspective. And it was really pretty eye-opening for me the more I started thinking about that. That day, 343 firemen, 60 police officers, and 8 non-911 EMTs and paramedics thought nothing about
Right.
running straight into that.
Right.
And I know I've personally, and I know Matt can attest to this because we've talked about it, I know I've been in fires and situations on a lot smaller scale than that, and I've stepped back and thought, we shouldn't be here. I can only imagine as those guys, some of them climb 55 flights of stairs one way, just focused on the mission and doing what they were supposed to do. And they knew the potential. You know, they mid-rise and high-rise fires, some of the most dangerous situations you can get into. It's so easy to get turned around. It's so limited as far as getting in and out. They knew. They knew the potential for what they were walking into. But the more I thought about that, and the more I started thinking about it from a biblical perspective, and it took me to Hebrews 11. And if you're familiar with Hebrews 11 is kind of the faith hall of fame. It's throughout the history of the Bible, it's a bunch of people that stayed focused on the mission. Even when you know they had to question what was going on. They had to think somewhere in their mind, I shouldn't be here. You know, when Abraham is carrying Isaac or walking up the mountain with Isaac because God said, go sacrifice your son, somewhere in the back of his mind, you know Abraham had to think, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't, this isn't right. I shouldn't be here. But his faith, he stayed focused on the mission. And he went into it knowing the potential outcome, but with the faith that he was going to come out the other side better for him. You know, the same thing when you think about Moses. As Moses is walking out of Egypt with basically the population of Mississippi in tow, and being chased and thinking somewhere in the back of his mind, he's got to be thinking, what am I doing? Why am I here? What am I doing? But his faith carried him through, and he stayed focused on the mission, and he saw it all the way through to the end. And there's just, you could go through just Hebrews 11, and you could go through and you could read every one of those. And you go back and you read their original stories, and they all shared that same focus. They all shared that same faith in what they were doing, and that they were doing it for the common good. And they were doing it, in that case, to glorify God, but because that's what they were told to do. And that's what those men and women did that day. They did that because that was what they were told to do. You know, one of the second things that I noticed, and I touched on this briefly a minute ago, the communication. If you ever sit, there's hours of dispatch tapes and recordings of the fireground communications and everything that was going on. And to hear those guys up there on those floors calling down to the lobby command and knowing they're trapped. You know, some of those guys got above the fire, they got cut off. You know, and these are guys that, like I said, they walked, some of them 55 flights of stairs, carrying hundreds of pounds of hose and hand tools and spare air bottles and everything they thought they would need. Because when they got up there, they knew that they were on their own, except for one guy on the other side of the radio. And when you listen to those tapes and you listen to some of those company officers calling back down to that commander, and you can hear in their voice the fear. You can hear in their voice the realization, the reality that they were facing. But the one thing through that entire scenario that never broke down was that communication back to that one focal point. You know, that one, which it was a collective, but that one voice that sometimes he was just on the radio telling guys, you're going to be okay. You're going to get through this. And it snapped with me. That's our prayer life.
Right.
You know, that's our that was their lifeline. The prayer is our lifeline. Our prayer life is our reporting back to the incident commander. Sometimes just for reassurance. Sometimes just to hear you're gonna get through the other side. You're gonna make it out. And sorry, I'm gonna try to get through this. You know, James 5:13 says that anyone that's in trouble, pray. And anyone that's happy, sing songs of praise. And I feel like that's where that becomes analogous right there. Is when we're in trouble, we have that person that we can talk back to. We have that relationship, we have that communication, and we have that opportunity to talk back to somebody to give us direction, to tell us you need to go to the 53rd floor, you need to go to the 94th floor, whatever it is, to give you the reassurance, to give you the hope, to know, like I said, that you're going to come out the other side. And also to be able to tell, thank you. You know, thank you for taking care of us. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for giving us the opportunity. Thank you for guiding us through it. You know, Matthew 6:7 says when you pray, don't babble like depending on the translation, some say pagan, some say Gentile. Because they think their prayers are going to be answered by repeating the same words over and over. And that's another thing that's really analogous when you get into breaking down true incident command. Is it's very simplified. I have a very short message to give you. You have a very short message to give me. And it's clear. And sometimes I know I'm guilty of this. Sometimes I start praying and I feel like I don't know what to say. So I just talk. You know. And I keep talking and I start rambling and you know and I think we're all guilty of that sometimes. You know, Romans 12:12 says that we're supposed to be joyful in hope, we're supposed to be patient in affliction, and we're supposed to be faithful in prayer. That goes right back to that, being faithful in prayer, using your prayer constantly, staying in prayer, staying in conversation, staying in communication, not getting cut off, not getting isolated, which it's real easy to do as we get into situations and we get moving and things start happening and everything's dynamic and everything's changing. It's really easy for us to lose that, and it's really easy for that communication to break down, just like it would have been very easy for that communication to break down that day. The last thing, and this was something I had never seen until Wednesday, and it hit home with me. And as I'm watching this video, you talk about Psalms 23:4 coming to life right in front of you. After the towers fell, they basically sealed off vehicle traffic to the island. Okay. Hundreds and hundreds of firefighters, police officers, medics from not just New York, from surrounding areas, were lined up walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, walking towards the buildings that had just fallen, faithfully focused on the mission. that's a 1.5-mile walk from the entrance to the Brooklyn Bridge to Ground Zero is basically 1.5 miles. Those guys are in full turnout gear, air packs, carrying tools, carrying whatever they thought they were going to need. Somewhere 150 extra pounds, give or take, focused on one thing, and that was the mission. And as I watched that video, there's this random guy following them with a camera, and they're walking between these buildings that are towering over them. And you know the reality is set in at this point with those guys that they just watched. They don't know how many of their brothers and sisters die. And if that's not walking through the valley of the shadow of death, I don't know what is. You know, I mean, that's just such, a perfect illustration of that verse. And as I watched that and I started thinking about that verse, and I started thinking about what we're called to do as far as loving each other, loving our neighbors. We talk about Matthew 28 all the time, going out, spreading the word and making disciples. And then I think about some of the conversations that I have, a lot of the conversations I've had over the last few weeks with people, as far as why they've left churches. And I think about the fact that, and I'm guilty of it, I'll put myself in this. We've, probably most everybody here has been to a church, has been in a group of believers, Christians, that they couldn't be bothered to walk across the room for a kind word. And these guys know that they're walking into potentially certain death. And I started thinking about, the first and second century. You start thinking about Stephen. You start thinking about the Jameses. You start thinking about Simon. You start thinking about Paul. That they all knew at some point what their fate was. And somewhere in the back of their mind, they had that same thought. What am I doing here? I shouldn't be. But their faith carried them through that. And they went and did exactly what they were called to do and exactly what we're called to do as far as going out and spreading the word and not just teaching the story of Jesus. And I think this is where a lot of us fail. I know I fail. Is not just teaching the story of Jesus, but actually introducing Jesus. Actually relaying Jesus to somebody as this is what he's capable of. This is what he's done for me. This is what he can do for you. This is where your faith can take you. And done. Got her, Danny? Get her corral. And it started bothering me the more I started thinking back about, like I said, several conversations I've had. And I've been open with a lot of people about things that I've experienced in church and things that have driven me away from church and driven me away from churches. And I know now, my spirit was wrong. I was relying on people and not relying on faith. But it's very easy, I think, for young believers or potential believers to get put off by it. But it's just, we know what we're called to do. We know what our mission is. It's been made very clear to us in Scripture. what our mission is. And if we collectively, as believers, not just the people sitting here, could stay as focused on the mission and willing to endure as what those men and women displayed 18 years ago Wednesday, we could change the world. And that's just something that I feel like we've got to stay focused on. You know, we've got to have that resolve. We've got to have that faith over fear. We've got to have that focus. We've got to have that focus on the mission. We've got to have that focus on carrying the word and going out into the world and doing what we're called to do. We've got to have that 9/11 like focus. And like I said, once we do, we can make a huge dent in this world instead of just sitting back and complaining. All right. That's all I've got this morning. It turned out to be a lot shorter than what it was on paper. It seems to be how that works out.
Always does.
Yeah. Cody, why don't you close this in prayer?
Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for everything you've given us, provided for us, tools, whether physical or spiritual, Father. You put each and every one of us in the right place at the right time. We just need to recognize your presence. Take up our cross and follow you, Father. All of our instructions are right before us. We've got brothers and sisters supporting us. And it's just that focus and that faith that we must have so we can go forward and do what you've called us to do. Setting aside our own feelings and thoughts and priorities for yours. I pray for those that weren't able to make it today, Father, or for everyone out there that's serving our country overseas, first responders, and